Erica talks K-dramas, C-dramas, T-dramas, HK-dramas. Erica talks K-dramas, J-dramas, Turkish dramas, Thai dramas. Erica talks Egyptian dramas, Indian dramas, telenovelas, but mostly K-dramas. Hello, everyone. So today we are going to talk about my favorite Bollywood movie ever, Jab We Met. And we are going to talk about the K-drama Tell Me That You Love Me from 2023 to 2024. We'll see how this goes. I kind of lost part of my sense of flow because, first of all, I woke up to the news that one of the pygmy hippos that I watch is going to be moved to a private zoo, which doesn't have such a good reputation. So all of us fans are trying to get together and find a way to convince the zoos to cancel this change and maybe also improve conditions for this pygmy hippo's cousin who was living in that zoo already. And then I also found out the terrible news that a friend of mine from an online game that I played in the late 90s has passed away. So we hadn't really talked very much, but we were still friends online. And she was a very good person, and I'm sorry that she died. And her children are adults now, but they're still pretty young. And to lose their mother, they were all very close, I think. It's very sad. So we'll see where we can go with this. And then I have to get back to my schedule of watching K-dramas because there are four, actually five K-dramas which are expiring soon. And I don't know the expiration dates of three of them. So I'm a bit stressed because they could disappear any day. And one of them I have more than 70 episodes left to watch. So it's a bit much. Anyway, let's take it away. Okay, so Job We Met was released in 2007. And the title means When We Met. And it stars Shahid Kapoor, who is my favorite Bollywood actor, and Kareena Kapoor. They are not related. They actually did date for a while, and they were in about, I think, five movies together. And this movie was filmed when their romance was ending. They're now married to other people and have their own families. So, they're both from filmmaking families. And so this is my all-time favorite movie. I've seen it several times. It was directed and written by Imtiaz Ali. I love it so much. I have it on DVD. It's one of the DVDs that was from the Netflix DVD portion, and you could keep the DVDs that you had out. This is the only non-Korean movie that I had from them. The other seven were all Korean. I also have the soundtrack, which because I love a couple of the songs so much, and I'll mention them during the course of this. But I was very upset, and I'll mention this again probably because I'm so upset. So I actually bought the soundtrack, and they changed the music for one of the songs, and I just felt that was awful. It was beautiful in the movie, and they decided to, I don't know, put other instruments in or something, and it just ruins it. And they don't have the movie version, but you can see it very easily on YouTube, or even if you get the DVD, they include the videos of some of these songs from the movie. So you can still hear it. It's just that version is not included in the soundtrack. So it starts off, you see this very sad businessman, and he leaves some sort of business meeting with a woman, and you don't know what's going on. And that is Shahid Kapoor, and he is playing businessman Aditya Kashyap. And so he leaves, and then he goes into this wedding, and he walks up to the bride and doesn't really talk to her, and they're both very sad. It's just like, what the heck? And he leaves, and then he puts something on top of a car, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. And then he just like walks away. And he is so despondent that he goes to the train station. He just gets on some random train, and you learn later he doesn't have a ticket and he doesn't even know where it's heading. He just got on the train. While he's there and he's sitting all sad, this woman is rushing to get to the train. It started to move and she's about to miss it. She's calling for help, and these men help her get up there with her luggage. And she goes to sit down, and Aditya is sitting in her seat. They sit together, and she is talking nonstop. And he gets very upset and eventually yells at her. Anyway, this is Kareena Kapoor playing Geet, and her last name is Dylan. I never do that because I don't think the last name ever comes up in the movie. Geet Dylan. And she is just very, very talkative. She ends up, I think she falls asleep talking. She comes awake and she's talking. She talks during her sleep. Just, very bright, vivacious, annoying. And Aditya is so upset. He kind of, I think he yells at her and gets up and leaves. And she ends up coming across him when he's about to jump off the moving train. And she's like, "What are you doing? This is dangerous. Don't do that." And it basically saves his life and acts like it's just normal and keeps talking, talking, talking. They get off at the next train stop and end up missing the train because what happened? Oh, because he had wandered off. Oh, so like in the middle of the night, the train stops and he gets off. And so she wakes up and realizes he's not there and goes to get him. And he's like, not going to get back on or anything. She actually, while they were still on the train, the conductor came around to collect tickets. That's when we find out he didn't have a ticket. So she kind of talks to the train conductor and is like, just, it's okay. He'll pay for a ticket. Just, give him the ticket. And he didn't have a destination in mind. So she's like, just give him a ticket to Delhi and saves the day. But anyway, he gets off the train, is about to miss it when it starts moving, and then because she's trying to coax him back on, they both miss the train. So the next stop is supposed to be a town called Ratlam, and it's 100 kilometers away. They end up in this taxi where the taxi driver is driving really, really slow, and Geet is like flipping out. So Aditya ends up taking over the driving and he's driving all crazy. And so they get to Ratlam before the train leaves. And so he's like, okay, whatever. And he walks away. Geet is so thirsty from all the adventures and everything. She's at a stand where she gets water and she just stands there drinking and does not notice that the train starts taking off and she misses the train again. So now some guys kind of threaten her. The taxi driver drives away. He doesn't want anything to do with them again. A man on a motorbike thinks that Geet is a prostitute. And so she's trying to get away from this guy and she sees Aditya and she hugs him. And then they actually introduce each other or, themselves to each other. And so they're not as adversarial at that point. And so then they're like, well, they have to go find a hotel in Ratlam. So they do. And Geet misunderstands. Like, I don't think it's just a love motel. I think it's also meant to be a regular hotel. But anyway, the desk clerk is asking how long they want the room, and Aditya is gonna be like an entire night, and Geet is like, wait, if we can, we only need it for 3 hours, 2 hours, and let's do three to be safe. The desk clerk thinks that it's so funny. Anyway, and she's completely oblivious. She doesn't pick up on this at all. And so anyway, they're in the hotel room and she gives him this whole spiel about how she knows karate and he wouldn't be able to hack her even if he wanted to. Then along the way, he takes out a picture of his ex-girlfriend, the one who got married, and she talks to him about it and she convinces him to burn the photo and flush it down the toilet. And that actually did make him feel better. And so he's beginning to kind of come back to life slowly with her help. And then there is, of course, a police raid on the hotel. So they end up having to run away. And eventually they end up on an empty bus. And this is when one of my favorite Bollywood songs is performed. And this is Ao Milo Chalo. And the playback singer is Shan. So Aditya performs this beautiful song, and it's basically about traveling and enjoying, like the journey is actually better than the destination sometimes, and that kind of thing. And so he's beginning to enjoy the whole trip. It's also during this song, there's this kind of playful thing, and they use color. They use pinks, reds, and yellows and oranges really well. There's this part where he steals a bike from somebody, or she steals, I don't know, somebody steals a bike from somebody and runs off, and it has these two cute little flowers acting as antennae. And they ride around, and you see some of the landscape of the area. There's all these mountains. And then at the very end, they do end up bringing it back to the bike owner. And so he's relieved because he thought he had lost it forever. So it's very cute. What, the first few times I really watched this movie, I thought that they were taking a trip all across India to like all the different parts and everything. But I looked at the map for some of these locations. They start off in Mumbai, and then they go to Ratlam, which I actually didn't find on the map. But eventually they kind of go to north, the northern bumpy part that sticks up, and they kind of seem to stay in that area. And a lot of it takes part in the north. So it's very interesting. There's lots of mountains and snow at times. So they eventually are sitting on this dead tree trunk by some water, and she pushes them in, and they end up having to get new clothes because they're all wet. And this is when she finds out that he is part of the Kashyap family, who are, you don't know until then. They're very famous because they run some big company. And it was a huge scandal because apparently his mother ran off with some other guy. So it's like, oh, and you don't know then, you do learn a little bit later that woman in the first scene in the business meeting with him, that was his mother. And so he has been very upset with her, and they haven't had a good relationship. And Geet actually has a kind of unique thing. She's like, oh, she apologizes for talking about the scandal the way she did. But then she's like, but how can you blame her? She loved them. And in love, there's no rules. And it was just kind of interesting, the take. And so then they end up going to her family's home in Batinda. She is from a Punjabi family, and they are very welcoming. They haven't seen her in a while. Geet jokes with him that he should marry her cousin Roop, who is just like her, she says, but like there's nobody like Geet. There's nobody. She is so vivacious and full of energy and joy. But you can see like her family loves her. They're very accepting of him. They make him do a song, which I think that's the song that people quite often like go to when they're thinking of this movie. It's good. It's a very nice song. The lyrics, when you see them in the subtitles, are very beautiful, and it's about Geet, really. But yeah, it's not one of my favorite songs. I love Ao Milo Chalo, and then later we'll talk about Yesh Kai. And Geet's grandfather insists on having Aditya stay for a week so that they can properly thank him for bringing her home. So in the morning, Geet insists on having him meet her off in a field on a tractor, and she confides in him that she is betrothed to somebody named Manjit Man. And in this conversation, she discovers, she's like, why are you speaking Punjabi? Why don't you ever talk Punjabi if you know it? And she finds out his mother is Punjabi. It's just a little thing. Oh, I guess his singing was actually after this whole confession thingy. She doesn't really want to marry Manjit. She, of course, is running off to be with her boyfriend. Aditya is like, have you talked with your boyfriend about it? She's like, no, I haven't talked with him about this. It was like, oh, okay. So Geet arranges for Manjit to see her kiss Aditya, and he's very upset, and he storms off. And so then there's kind of a scandal because everybody thought that she might be having an affair with him. But if she really is, that's kind of causing an issue because she's supposed to marry Manjit, and blah, blah, blah. And so at night, she has to run away and she has to have Aditya run away also. Like she explains why, and I can't even remember the reasoning, but her family, like there's this whole play, like he helps her decide how to do it because they're hiding nearby. And he's like, we have to wait until they go out and get everybody else. They're going to have all their vehicles and everything. And so they'll be away. They're not going to look close because they think, you're moving away. Then we move away. And then when she's leaving the house and she's kind of sad and she's like, am I doing the right thing? And he's like, no. But as you said, there's no rules in love. I thought that was kind of sweet. And then we go into the music video for Yesh Kai. And the playback singer for that song is Shreya Ghoshal. And I just freaking love that song so much. It's very beautiful. You get to see all the landscape and these different villages. You don't even know which villages they are. Maybe people who are more familiar with Indian culture would know. But you see a lot of native costumes and that type of thing. And it's so much fun. And part of the lyrics say something like, this love is like seeing part of heaven. It's not an exact quote, but something like that. And it's so wonderful. It's so full of life, and it's perfect for Geet. So then at the end of the song, they get to Manali, which is the town where her boyfriend Anshuman lives. And by this time, you've kind of seen the signs. Aditya is slowly falling in love with her, but he's very gentlemanly and doesn't make any moves. And so she wants him to come and meet Anshuman. He's like, no, no, I'll leave you here. You're good. I got you to where you needed to go. And so he wanders off and he's sad. And he heads back home to Mumbai. He actually signs an agreement to bring his mother back into the company. I guess they haven't been talking for about 5 years. She's going to get back her old spot. He's learning to accept her and be able to deal with her because of the conversations he had with Geet. And he also comes up with this great idea for a long distance calling card. Do you guys remember those? 2007 doesn't seem like that long ago, but wow. So he comes up with this long distance calling card called Geet for those who want to talk more. Loved it. It was so perfect. I don't know, that never hit me as much as it did during this last rewatch. It just was so funny because he had made this announcement and it was public and everything. Geet's family knows where he is and they come and three of them accost him and they're like, where is Geet? And so this is when you learn 9 months have passed since he dropped her off in Manali and they, had to run away together. He's like, what, you haven't heard from her? And they're like, no. And they're like, isn't she with you? What's going on? And so he kind of says that she's with him, but she's not there right now, but he will fetch her within 10 days. And so he immediately heads off to Manali, meets this Anshuman guy, and discovers the horrible truth. So Geet and Anshuman, I guess, never really fully dated. Somehow she became fixated on this guy. Yeah, you don't get all the details. She kept talking about marriage and doing all these things with the house and everything. And he was like, absolutely not. And he couldn't stand her. He thought she was just crazy. But there must have been something because they didn't live in the same city. So how did this even come to be? And he makes some reference to her calling from Shimla, which is another city. So then you see kind of flashes back to what happened with Geet when Anshuman tells her off and basically has her go. She keeps trying. She tries for at least a few days and then she's just very depressed and deflated and you can see the change in her. And she goes off to another town, which we learn later is Shimla. And she takes a job as a school teacher and she lives in a women's hostel. So I'm guessing it's just a regular boarding house, not really a hostel that people would stay in for trips or anything. I don't know. And she's just like losing all her color. She's dressing all in white. Well, not all in white. I think there was some blue in the outfit eventually, but she's very, unhappy. She's just going through the days. Aditya figures out where she is and he waits for her at the boarding house. And he's convincing her, you did all these wonderful things for me. And, well, okay, so it got a little bit ahead of he keeps talking to her and he's like, I'm going to take you to your family. And she's like, no, I'm just going to live out my days here. And she's like, you've already done so much for me. And he's like, what do you mean? I've done so much for you. You have done so much for me. And this is one of my favorite scenes. It's not like amazing quotable parts or anything, but he's like, you saved my life. I would not be here if it was not for you. And then because of you, because I was inspired by you, I came up with 3 inventions and my business is in better condition than it was before I met you, even when my father was alive. It's in better condition. And you changed my life and you made everything wonderful. And you can't be like this. I can't leave you like this. So he actually is going to go off. I think they're just going to go straight to her family, but she was not happy about that because she's so ashamed. The train, they do start off on a train again. And I guess it stops in Manali. And somehow Anshuman was like waiting there. Oh, wait, is that the day? Oh, yeah. So they had stayed somewhere in a hotel. And she kind of teases him, or he kind of teases her, uh, bringing back the jokes that she had made to him about knowing karate, and she couldn't attack him even if she wanted to, just saying back to her what she had said to him way back when. He is like, do you have a picture of Achaman so you can burn it and flush it down the toilet? And she's like, no. And he's like, oh. So he calls Anshuman on his phone and he makes Geet tell him off, and she really does. And then Anshuman starts to have second thoughts because of all that she had said. And so when they're on their trip back to Batinda, it stops in Manali, and somehow Anshuman is there. It's kind of a train. I don't think it's a train station. I don't know. It looks really nice. Somehow, I don't know. He ends up meeting up with her and everything. Aditya kind of encourages her to follow her heart. And like at some level he's in love with her and she's kind of having feelings towards him, but he kind of encourages her because now all of a sudden this person that she loved is willing to give it a shot. And so the 3 of them end up going by car back to Batinda, and her family, like, Aditya lets them know we're on our way. And they are super excited. They've got like this whole party set up. And Anshuman is like, what is going on? And Aditya is like, they haven't seen their girl for 9 months. And she's back. So that's what this is. And the family, of course, thinks that Aditya and Geet are going to get married. And they don't know anything about this Anshuman guy because Geet wasn't telling any of them. So they just think that Anshuman is Aditya's friend and they're treating him well, but it's kind of a weird experience for him. And then all these things keep showing that Geet's family really likes Aditya and they're expecting the 2 of them to get married. Geet has, like, Aditya wants her to tell the family, and he keeps encouraging her to tell the family the truth. And she has several opportunities and doesn't do it, doesn't take these opportunities to tell them the truth. And Aditya actually asks her, have you told them? And she's like, no. And I've had opportunities and I don't know what's wrong. I could have told my mother, I could have told my father, and I didn't. And I don't know why. The next morning, she ends up meeting with Anshuman, and I think it's out in that field again. And there's some part where there's like machinery covering the sound, but you can see him talking to her. And she's just like, the look on her face, like she doesn't know what to do. She's feeling very unhappy because I think then she realizes this isn't really what she wanted. And she actually said at one point when they first met Anshuman again in Manali, she said, "You abandoned me." Then I think she's thinking, like, they don't keep mentioning or keep bringing up, but Aditya went to all these lengths to help her out and didn't expect anything in return. There are signs, like people are picking up on, people will ask him, "Why are you doing all this for her?" And it's clear, like Aditya and Geet are in love, but they're not acting on it because of other things. So Geet kind of realizes in this field she really doesn't want to be with Anshuman. And she runs off, and Aditya is playing some game with one of her nephews or relatives. And she does this thing where she had done before and makes sure that Anshuman sees her hug Aditya. And I don't remember exactly what happens then. I guess he storms off. But she ends up marrying Aditya. You don't see the full wedding or anything, but there is like an end dance performance. And there's kind of a flash forward during that dance performance where you see her a few years down the line, and she and Aditya are sitting by her grandfather, and they have two little girls in between them. The grandfather has said throughout the film, when you get older, you can tell on first glance what's going on between a boy and a girl. And we knew there was something and blah, blah, blah. So it's just such a beautiful story. And I love how she saved him and then he came and saved her. And it was just beautiful. Now, obviously, her being obsessed with that guy who didn't return her feelings at all, it's not such a great thing. We see that a lot of K dramas. But I think a lot of people can relate to it. If you've ever had a crush on somebody or you were even dating somebody and you thought they were like the perfect person for you, and then down the line, reality kind of met with your fantasy, and you're like, oh, wait, and I don't even know what I was thinking. And so I think that was sort of the situation there. I just love the movie. I love taking it out every once in a while and watching it. And I absolutely love those songs. And to me, it's just such a wonderful story. And I think anybody will enjoy it. I think right now this movie is on Hoopla. So if you have a US library card, check it out if your Hoopla has that available. And it will pop up now and then on other streaming services. So I think I originally saw it on Netflix, and it's been on Tubi. It doesn't seem to be on Tubi right now, but probably now that I've said that, it's on there again. I don't know, because things come and go a lot. So anyway, check it out whenever you get a chance. Sorry I didn't warn you that it was spoilery, but you should know by now you're gonna hear the whole contents of something. And yeah, I'm sad that Shahid Kapoor doesn't do as many romances, but obviously because he's older, maybe that's not as much of a thing. Some of the romances he's been in lately, not really. I don't know. At some point we can talk about that weird romance, but anyway. And then he's in a lot of action films, and I tried to watch one recently because it was expiring, and I had trouble getting through it. I didn't make it through the whole film before it expired. So that was that. Anyway, my absolute favorite Bollywood movie ever. And now let's talk about Tell Me That You Love Me. The Korean title is 사랑한다고 말해줘, and it was broadcast towards the end of 2023 and ended in 2024. It is on Hulu in the United States, but you might find it on Disney Plus. They're merging them, so eventually it will be only Disney Plus. I watched it 2 times all the way through, and in preparation for this, I rewatched episodes 1 and 16. 16 is the last episode. And as I've mentioned, I absolutely loved it. It skyrocketed towards the top of my all-time favorite K-dramas. Didn't quite hit it because something that happens in the last few episodes, and we'll get to that. It was developed from a 1995 Japanese drama, Aishiteru to Ite Kure, and that was written by Eriko Kitagawa. If we're not westernizing the name, I think it should be Kitagawa Eriko. The Korean version was written by Kim Min-jung, and directed by Kim Yoon-jin. I believe they did a lot of pre-production work because several of the actors and actresses had to learn Korean Sign Language. I'm not sure. There's an actress who plays a deaf woman, and I'm not sure if she's actually deaf. And of course, we don't know how much knowledge they may have had of Korean Sign Language before the show. Because if you are related to a deaf person in Korea, you have access to schooling that can teach you. That's a kind of a newer development that they've had. I think Korean Sign Language has only been recognized as an official language in the last 20 years or so. That's pretty common around the world. And we'll get to that too. There's some things that they show in the show which reflect things that probably happen to Korean deaf people and which deaf people around the world can probably relate to. So I'll talk about that a little bit. So one of the things I really liked was that it was a more mature drama, although they do try to bring in a secondary plot romance for the best friend of the female main character and the female main character's brother. And it's got like that silly thing. And I don't know, like, I just don't know if the TV stations or the writers or the Korean public are that entrenched in these. We have to get these various storylines. I mean, it's like you kind of have that with American shows and British shows and that sort of thing. They'll have different things that they absolutely insist on. They just kind of shoehorn everything in. And that secondary couple gets kind of annoying. It was meant as comedic relief, but it became really annoying. And in the second watch, I thought it would become less annoying, but it actually became more annoying. But then they kind of don't appear as much for a few episodes, at least in the romantic sense. And so that helps that it's not like continuous throughout the show. So that was an element that I was just like, ugh. It wasn't as bad as some other shows where they tried to mix genres, but it just it didn't really fit so much for me. And I was thinking about it last night when I was rewatching the first and last episodes. I mean, there's a lot in the show that is how people would really act in real life, that I can imagine having a conversation like this or whatever. And then there's stuff like that secondary cutesy relationship where it's like they're not acting like real people. They are characters and very obviously characters. And I don't know, it's possible there are people like that in real life. But I would find it so absolutely irritating to have to deal with people like that. And I don't know. But the characters did have other things going on in their lives. We'll talk about all that, whatever. So it stars Jung Sung as a deaf painter named Cha Jin-woo. And you find out his story throughout the show. And what's really cool, and I'd actually forgotten some of the details, is that the first episode really sets the stage for things that happen throughout the show, but they don't weigh you down with flashbacks to remind you constantly, oh, this is why we had this earlier, or anything like that. So at the very start of the show, Cha Jin-woo is in Jeju Island, which is kind of their Hawaii. He's photographing an old house, and you don't really see that come up for many episodes. And when they do finally kind of explain it, they don't like hit your head over with the meaning. Well, oh yes, as usual, I need to say it's spoilery. I think I described all of Job We Met without giving that warning. You find out eventually he has a photograph. He was put into an orphanage and grew up in an orphanage. And thanks to a nun who was very caring, he had a relatively good upbringing. He was not deaf when he was born. He became deaf, I think it was around the age of 7 or 9, somewhere around there. It happened as a result of an illness that caused him to lose his hearing. And they just stuck him in a regular school. And this is common, or was common, possibly still is common for deaf children around the world. They're just expected to be in regular schools, and their classmates and their teachers don't learn the sign language, the local sign language, to communicate with them. So he was really left out, and people weren't understanding. And, I've had it happen where I've had like a deaf customer at the store, didn't realize they were deaf at first. And so I was like, why are they not responding? And then I was like, oh, okay, I'm ignorant. He was very isolated, but he did end up having a best friend. And this best friend stays his best friend throughout his life. His best friend goes up to own a bar or a pub. The best friend is played by Ho Jun-suk, and his character's name is Hong Ki-hyun. And he actually ends up marrying a deaf woman. And it's kind of interesting because he doesn't communicate perfectly in Korean Sign Language, but he has a really good relationship with Cha Jin-woo, and he loves his wife. And his wife is played by Jung Se-byul. I don't have her character's name. So they are real couple goals. This is the couple that is super cute to see because they have overcome the differences and know it's not always easy, but they absolutely love each other. And there's the storyline kind of towards the beginning. They have a daughter who's a few years old, and I can't remember what brings it on, but they discover that she might be going deaf. And so the wife is very upset. Gi-hun is like, it's going to be okay. And then they like never do anything anymore with that storyline. It's just like, it's okay, they'll get through it. And then you don't see the daughter anymore. Like, what the heck? And then at the very end, they're having a second child. But again, you don't see the daughter, you don't know what ended up developing. But the hereditary aspect of deafness was a real concern. So in the first episode, Cha Jin-woo is moving into his house and meets this grandmother, this neighborhood grandmother, and the woman's grandson. And as soon as the grandmother realizes that Cha Jin-woo is deaf, she gets very afraid and like takes the kid away and doesn't want him near Cha Jin-woo and all that stuff. I was like, this is really cheesy and it's really odd. But apparently this was a real concern that people have, not just in Korea, but around the world. So I follow all these different accounts to learn about deaf culture and deaf history and to learn American Sign Language and also hopefully to pick up other sign languages. And one of the things I came across was how Helen Keller, famous American deaf woman who also was unable to see, because that was the thing. They wanted deaf people for a long time to acclimate to what hearing people wanted them to do. And Cha Jin-woo also mentions something like this, it comes up repeatedly. He has isolated himself throughout his life because he feels like he has to make the reach out effort to other people because they are the majority. And he doesn't expect other people to make the efforts to reach out to him. And so anyway, in Helen Keller's time, there was real concern that deaf people would have deaf children. And so there was a kind of a eugenics thing going on. And I guess for a while, Helen Keller herself kind of bought into this until she started hanging out with these other people who kind of taught her that's not a legitimate concern and we shouldn't be aiming to like keep deaf people from procreating or anything. And of course, I don't know. I didn't read intensively about that. I just watched a video. So that's just the information, the very bit of information that I have. And this isn't about Helen Keller anyway. So maybe at some other point we'll talk about that if I watch a movie or something. But apparently that was a real concern. And one of the frustrations I had with this series is towards the end, the female main character, Jung Mo-eun, who was played by Shin Hyun-bin, one of the things that becomes a growing concern for her is that they can't do everyday little things that couples would do because he can't hear. She's just really frustrated because like they're in a grocery store and she can't just call out to him and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, for me, there are some things that were kind of omitted from this series. And one of the things is anybody can become deaf at any point in their lives. You can become partially deaf, you can become wholly deaf. And so it's unreasonable for you to expect anybody to have the exact same hearing ability throughout their lives because all kinds of things happen. I had a coworker, how many years ago was that? Like 20 plus years ago. She was in her 20s and she had started having like a lot of hearing loss because she listened to her music blasting all the time. It was not through a disease, it was not through genetics. It was because she blasted music in her ear. You know, explosions are a whole thing. In TV shows and movies, people temporarily lose their hearing in such an instance. But in reality, if you're near an explosion or loud gunshots or whatever, you could permanently lose your hearing. So I just felt it was very unreasonable that she's like, we can't do these couple things. Because there are, yeah, if somebody is differently abled, you're going to have a different experience with them. But that doesn't mean it's bad. And there are things that you can do with them that you might not be able to do with someone else. One of the great things about sign languages is that you can actually talk to somebody from a distance and they can see what you're saying. Whereas when you're trying to yell at somebody, other noises might be interfering. One of you may not be able to hear for some reason. You might mishear. And of course, in sign languages, also you have signs that are close to each other, so you can mix them up. But, there's advantages to knowing sign language and to knowing deaf people. And just, it's not some burden. It's just different. Anyway, so yeah, so Cha Janu lived a very lonely and isolated life, and he had kind of boxed himself in and shut himself down. But it's interesting because he's a painter. So he is trying to access emotions in a way. And so anyway, he's on Jeju Island. He's photographing that house. He's also, you see him going around, he's drawing. And it just so happens that Jung Moon has also gone to Jeju. And we find out she is a former flight attendant and she has decided that she wants to pursue acting. They don't really say how old she is. I would say she's in her 30s, early 30s. And she decides to pursue this other career. So she has a small role in, I think it's supposed to be a movie. I'm not entirely sure. And they're filming on the beach and it's not going well. I think she has one line, or maybe she's just supposed to have emotion on her face. But I think they end up cutting her and they're going to replace her. And then she has this scarf that's her own that she wears to the set. And they try to get her to give it to them so they can use it for the next woman that they're replacing her with. I mean, that speaks to how businesses and companies just feel that everybody's replaceable and they can take advantage of you by expecting you to give up all kinds of things, and they just don't care. And it was interesting that she's taking this risk, learning to act, or well, I mean, she's developing as an actress. So she's doing, I don't know exactly what that was. I think she was an understudy or something in this theater thing. It wasn't exactly a class, but they were not very nice to her. You see that when she goes back to Seoul. She's really struggling with this, if this is the right thing to do. And they don't mention it in the first episode, so I didn't get this information again, but she's not letting her parents know that she is becoming an actress. She doesn't want them to know yet. I think she's telling them that she's studying for a civil service exam or something like that. And they eventually do find out. Her brother shows up while Moon is in Jeju Island. Her best friend, who is her roommate, is waiting for a date, and Moon's brother, younger brother, Modam, shows up. Park Jinju plays the best friend. And I do not have the character's name written down. My God, my notes are really bad. Okay, so and then Shin Jae-hee is Moon's brother Modam. Anyway, so he had just gotten out of the military and he shows up at the house and he has this teasing relationship with the best friend. It's kind of funny, whatever, but this is the relationship that gets really annoying. He gets a job as a fitness instructor. I can't even remember why, but she starts going to the gym. And then, because I think she had heard about there was this hot fitness instructor. It turns out to be him. And so through all these things, and they are kind of funny, but it's also annoying. They do end up eventually dating. And it is like towards the end, they kind of make fun of how they annoy their friends by involving them in all their anniversaries. That is kind of amusing, but whatever. So there's that whole thing. Modam, I don't I don't know if he knows. I think he discovers that Moen is becoming an actress. Anyway, she's kept it a secret. And then they go home and visit their parents. And I think the mother is watching TV and ends up coming across where Moon is on a drama. And that was another thing. That was another role that Moon got where she finally got an on-screen role and it wasn't cut. But the lead actress was really mean to her and it was kind of horrible. But it was her first real on-screen appearance. So and her parents were very shocked and they were worried, of course, about this because even if you don't know much about acting, it's a very volatile thing. You don't have constant work. And in Korea, in particular, public opinion can really affect your career. You have to be very careful. It's very, and if she is in her 30s, which I think she is, that's already a topsy-turvy time for women, I think, because there is that whole impression, which I think it's kind of fading, but that's just I don't know. But there was that idea that women were at their peak at the age of 25, and after that, they're going downhill, and by the age of 30, your life is over. And that at 30, your life is over, that comes up repeatedly in K-dramas. I haven't heard it so much recently, but it was very much a thing some of the earlier K-dramas I was watching. So Moon and Modam's parents, and this is really cool. The father is played by Kang Shin-il, and he plays the father in Glass Mask, which is that K-drama, that very first K-drama that I ever started watching, which I am still watching now, and I'm working on it. And wow, they're so different. So it was kind of fun to see him again because I don't see him very often on screen. I don't know if he takes daily drama jobs most of the time. I haven't really run into him in that many roles. And then the mother is played by Kim Mi-kyung. She is one of those K-drama moms that you will see quite often. This actress played Oh Hae-young's mother, the title Oh Hae-young character in another Oh Hae-young, and just loved her. She's very comedic. I know that at one point she was offered a role where she would play a mother who was cheating, and she absolutely refused to take that role. She's like, I can't do that. I really like her. I follow her on Instagram. And so that's most of the main characters. So Moon and Chajinu kind of keep running into each other in Jeju. It's more than 3 times, I counted. They end up, so she is at a restaurant having lunch, and he's at a restaurant having lunch and drawing. And he's like in this outside section. So I kept thinking when I was rewatching last night, I was like, he was safe the entire time. If he had just stayed outside where he was sitting, everything would have been fine. But Jung Mo-hoon goes running for him. Anyway, so a fire starts in the kitchen, and she discovers it because she's inside when it happens, and she sees everybody looking, so she looks and sees all the smoke. So everybody's evacuating. And by this time, she has realized that Chachinu is deaf. And so she goes to find him and help him leave the restaurant. And he kind of panics when they enter the smoky area. And she falls, but he is able to kind of get himself together. And so they get out of there. They end up in the hospital. And she's had some smoke inhalation. I think she might have minor injury. And he was and so they communicate by writing messages back and forth. And then when they leave, she's hungry, and they discover that there's nothing open. So it's apparently Jeju is like LA, where everything closes early. So he ends up taking her. He has like this camper van, and he has ramen and stuff. And so they go and eat ramen. Then this rainstorm starts. They have to kind of shelter themselves in his van. And she's actually kind of enjoying it. And sometime along the way, like I think when they're eating, he actually communicates to her because he'll type on the phone and then show it to her and that sort of thing. He kind of is happy and she asks him, what? And he says, it feels lively for the first time in a long time. So he feels this connection with her and everything, but they say goodbye. He drops her off near her hotel or whatever. And then she continues. So she's lost that acting job, but she decides to continue and take a vacation before she goes home. On her last day, one of the women from the hotel gives her this notebook, sketchbook actually, and says that a man dropped it off for her. And it is a book of all these pictures, and in there is a very simple kind of drawing of Moon on the beach where she had been having that role and he had seen her. And he wrote to Miss Actress, and she was really happy because he was the first person who actually called her an actress. It's also kind of a point. The first Korean Sign Language word that she learns is the word for actor, actress. So she immediately that night, or that they spent all that time together, she started learning sign language. But then she didn't actually see him again. So she goes back to Seoul and she's working in a cafe and she's also working on those acting roles. She comes across this magazine at the cafe, which has an article about these paintings that have been appearing mysteriously on walls in public. And I think they have a picture of that one on Jeju Island that she saw, which I didn't mention before, sorry. It's a picture of a man's back, and it's supposed to be Cha Janu, so he kind of drew himself on a wall. And Moon had seen this wall, and so she wrote a note and left it there. And then Cha Janu saw her leaving it there, and then they kind of see each other in the road, and she lets him know that a vehicle wants to come behind him, so he moves to the one side. I don't think they really have any interaction at that point too much. They just kind of go on their own way. But yeah, so that was one interaction. He went and picked up the note, and you later see what she had written. He's continuing his life. He has a job at this art gallery, and he teaches a group of 3 deaf students. It's super cute. Let me tell you, this is the cute storyline. Forget that other couple and all that stuff. So he has 3 deaf students, 2 girls and a boy. And this, you see the first time they meet him. And this is really, it's really nice that you get to see multiple deaf people in the show and that you get to see how their existence is different from the way he grew up. You don't see his entire growing up, but you do see some of it. So they've got like this little community. And if you know anything, like in the United States in particular, I don't really have experience with other deaf communities. Community is extremely important. Going to events and meeting up with other deaf people, very, very important. If there's a blizzard, they will still do anything to get there. If they're, I mean, I'm sure in areas like where there are hurricanes and whatnot, they will still attempt to get to whatever because they really need to see each other and have that contact constantly. So it was kind of nice to see that there's this group of 3 deaf teens that can grow up together and help each other and act as support, and that they're being teenagery. They're not just having to accommodate everybody else around them. And so he's doing this course where they're not just learning from him, but they're searching for something. I don't know, that's how he describes it. And he does these different things in the different classes, and you see it. It's cool. And what is so cute, of course, they're having Korean subtitles on the show when they're talking in Korean Sign Language. And so when these teenagers are communicating, they have like this special font that has what they're saying. And then there's little cartoon versions of them next to the message. So when it's a girl, I didn't pay that much attention, but I think the little avatars that they've gotten on the screen are different for each one of them. Very cute. So anyway, the relationship with them and Chajinu is really sweet. And they do play a role in what happens in the show, and it's very cool. So Moon's working and Chajinu's working, and they both still keep thinking about each other. It's been several weeks, I think 3 weeks, since they had met in Jeju Island, and she ends up seeing him on a bus. There were a couple close encounters where they almost met up, but she one night sees him on a bus and she tries to kind of get his attention and fails. So she's sad and she kind of looks away, and I don't even think she starts walking. But like next thing you know, you can kind of see like the shadow of this person behind her. Not even that close, but like 6 feet away maybe. And she turns around and there Cha Jin-woo is. And so they meet, and it's a very, I think that was kind of the end of the first episode. I'm not even entirely sure. But it's interesting because it's not the standard 3 meetings and the person is meant for you. They've got more meetings and they incorporate these kind of standard things from K-dramas in there, but they're done a little bit differently and it's cool. So when they meet at the end, she introduces herself in sign language. And you can actually, so at that point, you finally get the voiceover from Jung Sung saying how Cha Jin-woo always felt that he had to reach out to other people, and it never occurred to him that anybody would really reach out to him. And it is very important. It was very nice. What's also, yeah, I mean, you get this sort of thing in K-dramas because they try to draw out the romance. They don't want you to immediately get the couple together because then why would you keep watching? So he is still very shut down. He's trying to protect himself. So there's some stuff that they have. They have this storyline where he realizes that she likes music and he ends up getting free tickets because he did a painting for this composer who it turns out is actually friends with Moon. Oh wait, no, I think it was a different person. I'm not really sure. Somehow there was that connection, but so anyway, he found out that she liked some singer or something, and so he invited her to a concert. And then there's a whole misunderstanding where that little boy from his neighborhood sneaks into his house because Cha Jin-woo adopts this kitten that he finds abandoned on the street, and the little boy likes the kitten, so he sneaks into Cha Jin-woo's house and he falls asleep behind something, so he ends up getting locked in and nobody can find him. And so they think, because they do find the little boy, they think that he's kidnapped the kid. And so he ends up getting taken to the police station. There's this whole thing where he has to wait for a sign language interpreter. And that's a recurring theme too. So here you've got, he had to wait hours for his sign language interpreter to show up. You see in flashbacks when you eventually get those, when he was in college, he had to depend on a sign language interpreter to help him get through his classes. And she kept making him wait in one way or another. And so it seems like accommodations are being made, but they're being done in a very inconvenient way. And it's kind of at the whimsy of these people who are sign language interpreters. Like, this is a service that is supposed to be supplied by official sources like the university or the police station, and it's not done in a timely manner. And Cha Jin-woo at the police station gets very angry and pounds it. It's really loud. Don't have your sound on too loud because it's like really scary when he pounds the desk. And it's very frustrating for these people. And you can see why people would give up and kind of withdraw, because why would they want to deal with hearing people if you have to deal with these inconveniences all the time? So I think we really do need to be more accommodating. We should learn sign language. We shouldn't just expect them to lip read or try to speak out loud because it's not the convenient thing. Yeah. Anyway, so again, so boxy, I'm sorry. So he ends up getting out of the police station late and realizes that he is late for the start of the concert. And so he's very upset because he's disappointed her. And he didn't really want to do the concert. There's this weird conversation. I don't know if it was then or later, because he goes back and forth about, should I be involved with her or should I protect myself and stay away? And he says he doesn't like music. And it was interesting because the deaf people I know, they actually do enjoy music. They can experience it through the vibrations in the floor and the walls or whatever. And so they do enjoy music, they dance. So when he says that, I'm like, was he just protecting himself or does he really not experience it? Was this just a failing of the TV series where they didn't think about how deaf people can actually experience music through vibration? I don't know. So I guess if we a combination of both, even. So there is a composer that Moten knows from a while back, and he is heartbroken. Like he had a breakup. He's kind of messy, and somehow like Chajinu does a painting for him, but I don't know if that's how he got those tickets or if it was from something else. But anyway, this composer, let's see, I have his character's name and everything. The actor is E.J. Kuhn. And I did not write down his character's name. Oh, I think it was Johan. And once he realizes that Moen might be interested in somebody else and somebody else is interested in her, that's when Johan begins to really exhibit his feelings for her. And I'm like, I just hate that. I just like this character was just ugh. And I guess in the original Japanese series, a lot of people were turned off by the fact that the female main character ended up having a one night stand or something with her childhood or whatever friend. And that's in this series represented by Johan. So people were really worried, but nothing ends up happening. He's kind of moping about her. But there is a thing in the last episode where she finally tells him, not straight, but clear enough that he gets the point. And she's basically like, I don't feel that way about you. I hope you'll find somebody that loves you the way, I don't know how she phrases it, but basically the way you deserve to be loved and that you can love them back. But I don't feel that way about you. That was that. So I think they changed a lot from the original series. I actually tried to watch that series and I made it through one episode. And I found the female main character so annoying, I could not make it past the first episode. So it is very different because the characters are not exactly the same. I mean, I think there are some similarities between Chajinu and the Japanese main character. I mean, male character, I mean, in that they're kind of quiet but yeah, I'm glad that they changed Jungmoon to be not that sort of annoying. Like she's outgoing, but she's not not overbearing or interfering. She respects boundaries. I like that difference. Although, again, I didn't see the whole Japanese series. I could not bring myself to watch the whole thing. So maybe the character settled down a little bit. So, as I had mentioned, when Chajinu was in college, he had an interpreter help him through his classes. And her character's name is Song So-kyung. And let's see, who was the teenage Chajinu? Teenage Chajinu was Big Sung-chul. And when they're in college, this romance starts up. And I did not expect this. Often, like either the flashback or the present day will be better than the other. They're both enjoyable, of course. And the romance that starts up between Song Se-kyung and Cha Jin-woo when they're in college is adorable. And then there's the storyline. So you see at the very first episode, Jin-woo had some sort of a trauma about a fire. When they're in college, Song Se-kyung, she knows Korean Sign Language because her father is deaf, and she was always his interpreter and stuff. And to help her get through school, she's working as an interpreter. And so when Chajiju is very irritated because she keeps showing up late and stuff, she's like, please, I really need this job. And so they kind of compromise about how to do it because he agrees not to take as many early morning classes. So their romance starts. And I guess one late night, they were working on art in some building. And she's being stalked by some guy, and we guess it's another student. We never find out who the stalker is. We found out who's accused of it, but we never find out who that stalker is. And I don't so they started a fire, and Cha Jin-woo, because of how smoky it was and everything, he didn't realize that she hadn't gotten out. And you see the whole story, like she blames him because she feels that he abandoned her, but he couldn't see her through the smoke. He didn't know that she was still in the building. And I think he wanted to go back in for her or something. I can't remember exactly. There's this other guy. I didn't even write that character or actor's name down because I was like, oh my God. So there's this other guy who shows up as an adult later too. And he was obsessed with her. And she didn't like him because she liked Cha Jin-woo. And so he ended up getting accused of I think, setting the fire and trying to hurt her, when I think he actually ended up rescuing her. I can't remember. It was very weird. So anyway, it ruined that guy's college career. It's this whole story that's circulating around them as adults. Sung So Kyung ended up, because she doesn't talk to Cha Jin-woo about it. She's so upset because she felt that he abandoned her. And so she ends up running off to Europe and becoming this curator or whatever for the art gallery. I'm like, okay, she was her father's interpreter and she just ups and goes to another continent. We never see the father, not even in the flashbacks. So I don't know. And we also never find out who the real stalker is, because that annoying guy who was obsessed with her insisted all the way through the show, and we have to believe him because there's no indication. There was some other person that was doing this, and so this annoying painter just like hated Cha Jin-woo, was so mad. In the very last episode, he comes in and insists that Cha Jin-woo has to drink with him. Just like, what the heck is happening? And yeah, he has a very bad personality, but he ends up becoming friends eventually with Sung So Kyung. Sung So Kyung ends up coming back from Europe and running the art gallery. And so it's a little bit uncomfortable for Cha Jin-woo. She does that K-drama thing where, well, actually, it's not just a K-drama thing, because I've seen it in American shows too, where the ex just keeps like barging on in and expecting the other person to listen to them or be responsible for how they feel or something. It's just weird. So when she comes back and enters the picture, that's when Jung Woon starts feeling very insecure. She sees Sung Si Hyung come to Cha Jin-woo's house one night, and Cha Jin-woo lets her in. I think it was raining. So it's like, well, of course he did. I mean, that was the nice thing to do. And then he's listening to her, and they end up having a conversation, which I'm like, wow, it like really hit me hard. And I think I even cried a little bit because of this speech that he gives in sign language, of course. It was like, what? But I'm so glad that Jung Moon did not hear it, because I think that would have really hurt her and that would have instantly ended their relationship. So he says, there's all this stuff I don't even know, but he says that he he doesn't love Moon with the fire that he had when he was younger. Like, he had been through a lot of stuff. We find out after Song Seok-hyung left him and that whole thing with the fire, he ended up going and living, I think it was like in the forest. And for some reason, I keep thinking he was living in a cave, but I don't think it was a cave. I think it was a shipping container. And he was painting. Like, all he was doing was painting. And so that was one of the things I became obsessed with too during one of my watches. I was like, I mean, he was living out in the woods away from anybody, no contact with anybody for I think it was 5 years. And he had to have been like killing and eating animals because he would need protein. So it's interesting, like things that just never actually come into the actual storyline. But there's like, I don't know. I know a lot of people don't have a problem with hunting. I understand it's the part of a lot of people's lifestyles and that's the way we've lived for centuries and whatever. But it is kind of different when you see this gentle person who adopted the kitten, who doesn't want to hurt anybody and just wants to be left alone. And you realize he's probably having to go out there and kill rabbits or something. So, anyway, just a thought. I apparently think about the show too much. Oh, yes. So, back to that whole stalker thing. Like, that stalker, there was some indication that he might still be around when they're adults. And I'm like, yeah, they never caught the actual stalker. And there was some incident kind of early on with adult Song So-kyung, which indicated that he was around there then. It's like, what the heck? I don't know. Maybe she was just kind of imagining it because she was so worried. And they did have a flashback, so it could be the flashbacks kind of influencing the present day thing. Anyway, whatever. Jung Moo-in starts feeling insecure because she saw Sung Se-kyung talking to him, and she comes across this box of old things in Cha Junu's house, and he has letters from or to Sung Se-kyung. I don't even know if he'd ever opened it, but he kept the stuff for all that time. I don't know if it was that episode or the one, it must have been the one before because the final episode did not have him burning the stuff. But it was very upsetting to me. So, okay, sorry. So she becomes insecure about the relationship. And then she starts getting upset, kind of annoyed that he doesn't understand all the things about her. They can't just do whatever. They can't do things like listening to music. He like turns on the car radio for her one point early on, and I think the car radio is broken. So she's just like and ends up shutting it off. And then later he turns on the radio. He gets a radio for her to listen to when they're hanging out, and he turns it to some station where it's music that she doesn't like, and she pretends it's okay, but then she turns off the music, and he doesn't realize right away, but I think later. And then, some nights she'll stay over at his place, and he's realizing something's not right. Like, she's not happy. And so he tries to get her to talk to him, and she won't. And then she mutters something about it's frustrating, or it's this word that can be frustrating or annoying. And she doesn't realize he has the phone translator on, so it translates for him. And so he's a bit heartbroken at that point. And I think that was when he really decided he had to let her go. And it was just sad because she wouldn't communicate with him. Like, he kept trying to communicate with her. I can see kind of where she was coming with the insecurity about Sung So Kyung. I think if she had just waited, and if she had heard that conversation between him and Sung So Kyung, she would have realized like he was not interested. But I think the content would have been kind of hurtful. Oh, yes. So, sorry, back to that conversation. So he says this whole thing about how he couldn't love her with the fire that he had when he was younger because he doesn't have that fire anymore. But he would love her. I can't remember how he phrased it. Like this quiet, with everything he had now, in this quieter way. And it was kind of nice, but it was also heartbreaking in a way. And so Sung Se Kyung kind of backs off for the most part. And they have an exhibition of his art, and it's very successful. Everything's sold. And there's this incident where this woman comes in, this older woman, and she starts crying when she's looking at one of his paintings. And then a while later, this rude man comes in, and Jung Moon encounters him, and he's not very nice. And so it's kind of like, what is this? And then later he contacts her, and he's like, it eventually comes out like it's not all explained all at once. But his wife had been married before him, and they had had a son, and the husband died. And so her family forced her to give up her child. Actually, I think they actually like basically stole the baby and gave him up for adoption, and she couldn't get the baby back. She had eventually married him. He was very insecure and very bitter that she would even spare any thought for her first husband. And he was, I think, irritated that she kept thinking about the son. And she just happened to go to the exhibition because of the last name of the son, or maybe the full name. Maybe, I think the orphanage maybe didn't change his name. It kind of becomes apparent, like they're pretty sure that Cha Jinu is her son. And you do see, like, when Cha Jinu goes to see her at the end, she says, "You look exactly like him," meaning his father. Or not exactly like him, he looks so much like him. So basically, it turns out this woman has dementia and she's dying. And so the second husband wants to get her one of the paintings, but it's too late. They've all been sold. But here's a secret, apparently. Sometimes galleries will hold some of the art back or something, and they didn't end up doing that in this case. But Song Seok-young ended up buying one of his paintings for herself. And then as a gesture, when she finds out this whole, I think she doesn't find out the whole story, but she kind of gets the idea that this woman that wants the painting is dying. So she ends up giving him the painting so he can take it to the woman. And he goes and meets her, and then gives him closure. So there was that whole thing. Oh, I forgot the whole storyline about the orphanage. So like Tajanu, quite often they'll show to show that somebody's a good person. He goes back to the orphanage and brings gifts and spends time with the other, the new orphans. And the nun who's in charge just loves him. She's like his mother. His best friend, Gihyun, wait, is that it? Yeah, Gihyun, is also an orphan. And so like, it's kind of indicated that he's also, like, kind of, but not, like, Cha Jinu is the one that really supports the orphanage. And there was a sick little girl who only wanted to go to school. And so Cha Jinu had painted a mural of her after she died on the wall near the school. And so I guess all these murals are showing up. There was that one that he had painted in Jeju Island, which was his back. And when he's in Seoul, he was painting a mural and ended up having a misunderstanding where he ended up getting hauled away, but it came out that he had been painting a mural. It wasn't legal, and so he got in trouble. There was that whole thing. And I think it was Gi-hyun who gets him out of there, or maybe it was Sung Soo-kyung. Anyway, Moen kind of figures out that he's the one doing the murals. It's very, I don't know. It's kind of funny now because I work for a city and this city does not like murals, and I happen to like murals. It's kind of funny. So I'm like all for the illegal murals, but not as part of my work. And let's see, what else am I forgetting? Oh, so there was another incident. So they try all these, or they have all these different things where you see the encounters and the difficulties that deaf people can encounter. So Cha Jinu encounters these teenage boys bullying this other one, and he gets involved. But it was somehow that kid, like, he had seen something and kind of ignored it. And the kid didn't realize that he didn't understand what was going on fully because he was deaf. So the kid, I think, thought that he was just ignoring him, where he wasn't. He hadn't it was this whole, I don't know, this whole thing where people assume stuff and you don't know. And you don't even need to be deaf to have this misunderstanding go on, but whatever. He ends up later seeing the boys bully this boy again, and he actually gets involved and gets hurt, I think. And then he ends up, I can't remember exactly, like, the kid was mad at him still, but Moon ends up giving that, there's, in that magazine, they have a whole article about Cha Janu and how he's deaf and all that stuff and how he started painting. And she gives a copy of this to that kid. So then he realizes and it's like, oh. And so he ends up coming and joining the class. And it's interesting to see, like, the shoe on the other foot, where the deaf people they're the majority, and they can act all impatient and irritated with the hearing kid, but they accept him. Eventually, they're very nice. And so the four of them become great friends. And then in the last episode, so Chajinu has broken up with Moon. Oh, I need to talk about all that. So Chajinu realizes that she's unhappy and he ends up breaking up with her at some point, and it must have been in like the 15th episode, not the 16th, because I don't, it didn't happen in the 16th episode. He ends up burning like all this stuff, and I thought he had burned the note from her, but I think he didn't end up burning it. Like he kept it back, but he was like, and it's like, you don't do that when the other person didn't wrong you. Like, it was weird to me because I think he was just trying to end the memories and cut that part of his life off. I just, yeah, I was very upset about the burning thing, even though he did keep at least one thing behind. But he ends up breaking up with her. That happens. I think it starts at the end of the 15th episode and then it continues in the 16th episode. And so he tells her all this stuff. I don't even, it was a very beautiful speech, but it was very upsetting because he was breaking up with her. And he says, I think I'm going to be all right for the rest of my life. And thank you. Then like walks off. I can't remember what the rest of the speech was, but it was pretty, but it was like, oh, that's just terrible. And so she's devastated, and then there's the whole thing with his mother and the painting and all that. And so she kind of finds out through sources that he ended up meeting his mother. Oh, yeah. So Moon had seen that photograph of, this was the only thing he had left from before he was adopted. And it was this old style house. And she was sitting with him as a baby. And so he was trying to find where he was actually from. So he was going around and photographing all these different houses to, I think, compare it to the house in the photograph. But they don't make a big deal about that. Anyway, so Moon kind of puts things together about whatever. So she starts going off, and she was on some trip because she wasn't happy, and she was having all those doubts. And so she goes off on a trip and actually encounters the house just kind of by chance, I think. Yeah, I don't know. And so she ends up sending him a picture of it, and he's like, "Oh." And so he ends up coming out there, and they look around. And I think that is how she gets onto the whole path of that elderly woman actually being his mother and all that. So she kind of helped him get closure in that. And apparently he has a younger sibling from the second marriage and a niece or nephew. I can't remember if there were multiple kids. So he could potentially have a family, although the stepfather's not very nice, but whatever. And they did seem to be welcoming. So you never find out what happens with that beyond his hospital visit to his mother, but I would hope they would kind of get in contact with him and stuff. I don't know. So they break up. She's all upset. She continues acting and she's doing pretty well. She is also, you kind of get hints throughout the show, like her parents don't seem to have a very happy marriage. There's something like going on, but you don't quite get the full picture. And then in the 16th episode, she goes back to visit her parents. And it comes out she remembers her mother isn't her actual mother. So at some point, I think it was that her mother had died and her father started dating this other woman. And I think Modam is actually the son of the second marriage. Moen had always felt a little bit weird because she realized this second mother wasn't really her actual biological mother. And I think she was feeling like there's more of a separation between them than there actually was. And so she ended up thanking the mother for choosing her, for choosing to be her mother. And the mother is like, no, you chose me. The very first time we met, you called me mom. And so there's this whole thing, and then the father hears that from outside. So I think that heals the rift, which was a kind of a weird rift anyway, from my perspective, but whatever. And so that, was finished there. Moen gives that whole "I don't feel that way about you" thing to that friend. Her brother and her roommates are happily romancing away. I'm not entirely sure if they get engaged, if it was an actual engagement or just a promise ring, but they're still together. And then the best friend starts her own place where people can do art and practice and stuff. And she's started doing art again. I guess she had stopped doing it because she was working at the museum, at the gallery. That's kind of a trope that I'm just like, really, because they seem to, for the future, or for like the flash forward type things in the end episodes of shows, to show that somebody's happy or whatever, they always start their own business. I'm like, everybody can't be in charge of their own business. Everybody, it's like, what is it? When you're studying business management and that sort of thing, everybody is not going to be the manager. You've got to actually have some employees under you, and there's going to be a hierarchy at some point. But it seems to be like shorthand in K dramas to show happiness that people start their own businesses at the end of the show. I don't know, whatever. Moon is successful as an actress, and she ends up in a play, which is that one at the beginning where she was kind of doing the training and they weren't being so nice to her. And she ends up having an actual role. She had been up for a role in the play in the beginning and got rejected, and they were very not nice to her. And I think it was some of the same people that she was practicing with. I'm not entirely sure. It could have been different situations and I'm just mixing in my mind. Anyway, so she has an actual role in this play. And so Cha Janu, he had gone off for a year to, I think, New York or something to like do a show of his art. And he came back and he had given away his cat to the little boy. But I mean, the cat would be in good hands, but still, I'm sad. So he comes back and he meets up with his former students who are now in college. And I think like when he was teaching them, they were in high school, but I'm not really sure. They could have been college students back then too, and it was just now you see them on campus. So Cha Janu goes to talk at their class, and they meet up with him afterwards for lunch, and they gift him a ticket for a play, and they're like, "You absolutely have to go. We saw it. We really liked it." And they know that Jung Moon is in it, but they don't tell him. And so he goes and he ends up meeting with Moon. Oh, yes. So that annoying guy who was obsessed with Sokyung made Cha Janu drink with him. When Cha Janu got drunk because that guy insisted that he sit with him for longer, afterwards Cha Janu ends up going outside and sitting down, and it's not right by the bar. It's somewhere further away. So this might not have even been the same night. Maybe he was into drinking because he was so depressed. I don't know. He ends up sitting on like this planter or something along a street, and he is so drunk. He imagines Mullen in front of him. And he actually, and they kind of make a big deal about this. I guess when he was a teenager and would sleep, he would whisper words, or not whisper words, he would say words in his sleep. He never actually vocalizes. There are deaf people who can speak, and they are not necessarily silent when they're talking, they will make sounds. So that was another thing that was kind of missing from the show for the most part. Anyway, he is so drunk. He actually says her name. And I think it was a really good representation of how a deaf person who hadn't really vocalized, at least for many, many years, would talk. So anyway, he says Moon, and he's so sad. And so that was before he had gone abroad for a year. And then, or I think it was, yeah, because he goes away. And there was this whole thing in the airports where he and Moon almost run into each other, and you're never really sure if they saw each other, and I don't think they did. I think it turns out that they didn't actually encounter each other directly at the airport, but they felt each other. They felt each other's presence. So anyway, he goes to the play and ends up running into her before the performance. And so then she notices him in the audience when she's on stage. He's not that far back, he's just a few rows in. They have the whole thing in the play. The dialogue is like meaningful to the show. And there is an element, like, they would go on about things, and I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I understand the words you're saying. I understand, I think, the emotions that you're trying to evoke and all of that, but I'm not getting it. Like, it's kind of like that's not, I don't know. That happens sometimes with Korean shows. It happens in several places here. So basically, the dialogue is that people who are different or have some sort of disability of some sort can still fall in love with each other. I don't really know what the whole point was. Anyway, it was meaningful to them. And so after the play, she's hoping to run into him and she thinks he's gone. And then it turns out that he's there. And so he reintroduces himself as if it's the first time to her. And then they kind of walk together. And then, like, the show basically ends. And there's a little epilogue where I think it's even that same place where he broke up with her. And so they're together and they're walking along together and kind of laughing together and that sort of thing. And that's the end. So they're back together. So the whole thing where she started having the doubts, like around episode 12-ish, and where Sung So Kyung keeps interfering and all that stuff. And then that annoying guy who's like so angry all the time. It's like, dude, what the heck? And that kept it from being in the very top position, but it's still like very near the top for me. I think it's like number 2 or 3 of my favorite K dramas of all time. And also these conversations, like they keep going on about stuff, and you're supposed to, and it's just like it's not. I don't know. It's like different emotions that don't really match up with what I am seeing for me. Am I missing something? I don't know. Maybe it's above me. But I really do enjoy that show. I think I hit all the major points. So, yeah, I don't know. I highly recommend it. It's very interesting. The one thing I really wish there was an opportunity for people outside Korea to study Korean Sign Language. So that app that you see Moon use, it's available, but it's only available if you're a Korean citizen or you have a Korean ID number or something. There are probably ways around it. I'm not sure, although the app might be blocked outside of the country. I'm not sure of that either. But I really wish they would make more opportunities for people to learn it. There is an app that teaches American Sign Language, British Sign Language, and Austrian Sign Language. Maybe they could add Korean Sign Language, or the institute in Korea that deals with this whole thing, maybe they could make it available around the world. I think it would be very useful. There's a lot of Korean Sign Language in Korean movies and TV shows, and I think it would bolster communication. It would be very cool. I was fascinated because there are signs which don't seem to mean the exact same thing, even though they're the exact same sign. And it's interesting how different places around the world will have different signs. Like, how did it come to be that sign instead of something else? And I don't know. It's just very interesting, and I liked that it was a mature story. There was a lot of things like her parents were worried over her being with this guy, and they didn't make a big deal about it, but he is older than her. They don't emphasize that point too much, but that's kind of, and he's also, because he's deaf. And then there's the whole thing, it's funny, with him being an orphan. Quite often that is a sticking point for a lot of parents in Korean dramas, because there's this whole thing about you're supposed to have two parents raising you, and if you don't have two parents, even if one of them died early, but partially you grew up with them, that's still some sort of black mark against your character, even though it's very, I don't know. I think there's a lot of superstition and kind of prejudices against people who have different looking families, in a way, not the traditional family. And so it was interesting how they addressed it, but didn't overemphasize it. Her parents were very nice. They were very likable parents. And they seem very unhappy at the beginning, but you can see at the end they actually are happy with each other. And maybe some of the unhappiness was because they were worried about the kids. I don't know. Yeah, I really think this was one of the best performances of both Jung Woo-sung and Shin Hyun-bin's careers. I highly recommend it. And yeah, that was it. So I'm not sure which episode I'm going to try to do next. I I actually would like to do an episode featuring Top Chae Sang-hyun, uh, because he's in Squid Game 2 and Squid Game 3, and he is supposed to release his solo album soon. So I would like to work on that, but I don't know that that'll be the next episode or not. Anyway, thank you for sticking with me through this very long episode. And if you have any questions or comments, you can email me at ericatalksdramas@gmail.com, and check out my YouTube channel. It's Erica Talks Dramas, all one word. I'm on Instagram, Erica Talks Dramas, all one word. And I hope to see you next time. I hope I didn't bore you. Anyway, oh wait. So the reason I have Job We Met and Tell Me That You Love Me put together is because I think even though in Tell Me That You Love Me, it's a very subtle point, I think Jung Mo-eun really does save Cha Jin-woo's life. Like he's just going through life and surviving, living day to day, just kind of not opening up to anybody, not really enjoying anything, just kind of being there. She brings back life to him. So she saves him in a sort of similar way to how Geet saves Aditya in Jab We Met. And I like that the women are the saviors and the guys also save the women in ways, but it's not all about Prince Charming is going to come and rescue you on a white horse. It's not like that. And that the women actually do the saving first. So that was just my thoughts. Anyway, maybe I'm just being overly reflective of things. So thank you for sticking with me. Hope to see you next time, and have a good night.
Erica talks K dramas, C dramas, T dramas, HK dramas. Erica talks K dramas, J dramas, Turkish dramas, Thai dramas, but mostly K dramas. Erica talks Egyptian dramas, Indian dramas, telenovelas, but mostly